So today we're going to talk about good garden sanitation. So you're going to have things you're going to do in the fall and things you're going to do in the spring. And basically, it's the same three issues, whether it's fall or spring. It's about pests, it's about diseases, and it's about soil health. But before we go into those three, because we're going to go in the garden and do that, Diane's going to talk to you about how to keep your tools clean, how to sanitize your tools. The easiest way to spread disease in your garden is to cut a plant with the disease and take that tool and cut the next plant. And things like fungus spread very, very easily that way. So we're going to do a little how to clean up your tools. And it's not just at the end of the season. You should actually clean your tools every time you come out of the garden.
Any implement that you use that touch your plants, because as Peggy said, if you have a plant that has some kind of pathogen or disease and you are trimming something off, that's now on your scissors. It could be on your gloves as well, and most likely you're going to transfer it to the plant you're going to work on next. So it's really important that it's not just your tools, but it's your pots, your little seed trays. If you're going to use them from one season to the next, those you're also going to want to clean and sanitize. So what other things would you sanitize?
Your gloves.
Your gloves.
Really important.
Yeah. Any
ties,
tool.
Like sometimes I use ties.
Anything.
Yeah, or you might throw those
Clips,
away and use not your clips. You can clean those.
Mhm.
So it's important that we clean all of those. And what do you think is a good time to clean them? When?
When you're done using them.
Perfect. Really. So if my sanitation could be better. I know you should clean your tools every single time you use them, and that's always in my mind, but sometimes I run out before I clean them. So perfect. Another time is like maybe in the fall, get all of your tools together, everything you're going to use this coming spring, and do a real cleaning on it. So we can use wipes. Do you have sanitary wipes with you? Which you do, or you can also make your own sanitation product. So you would use a gallon of water and 2 teaspoons of chlorine bleach. You can either dip your tools, it won't hurt the handle, or you can put it in a spray bottle, spray it, and then wipe them down. Everything, including handles. So real easy to clean them. It doesn't take much time, but it's just remembering each time to do that. So let's pass out some wipes. Oh, are they going to take their tools out or no?
It's totally up to them if they want to practice it. You got these wipes. I also have these these are like nice individual packets. I like because I can just throw them in my pocket or in my tool bin.
Who would like to clean? That's it.
It's not a bad idea to clean brand new tools when you get them. Lots of times there are machine oils on them.
Yeah.
So, you might want to clean them off anyway.
We'd like to clean. So if you use your tool in this garden today, you should clean it
Before you go
whatever
home.
might be here, you might transport back to your own garden.
And we know we have tomato blight.
Yeah.
So
we know we have tomato blight in the soil here.
So you don't want to transfer to a healthy plant. And
Right.
that's what will happen most likely. So you do have some control in the spread of disease in your own garden.
I keep a hose with a pressure nozzle, right? Like kind of on the railing. As I come out of my garden, my shoes, because I go from my vegetable garden. Sometimes you miss and you get wet feet, but
brush the dirt off or the garden hose
use
to clean all the
pressure,
debris.
everything.
It
and then
cleans better if you've cleaned off the debris before you sanitize your tools.
Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
a better job.
Also, let it dry in the sun. Sun tends to solarize and kill a lot of pathogens. So after you clean your tools, put them out in the sun to dry.
So it's a good habit to get into. Anyone have questions? Do you want to add anything before we?
Harvest buckets. Whatever you're
Same thing.
harvesting in, if you harvest in a bucket like these green tomato bucket that we have here, if you're using it and you have disease, you should clean it. But also, just at the end of the season, it's a good idea when you're cleaning your pots and everything else to do your harvest buckets as well. That's when people forget.
Yep.
Harvest buckets.
And if you take a plant and you're transplanting a plant, you want to sanitize the vessel it's going into, and then you want to clean up the one that it came out of.
And clean the roots of the plant,
Yes.
because you can just be transferring a pathogen from plant roots. It's not, 100% guaranteed you're going to get everything off. But if you hit it with a good pressure hose or something, And, you know, you have a good chance that you're going to get rid of some of the pests that might kill your plants. Ready for the garden?
But it shouldn't scare you from gardening. It's just like things, but the best practice that like we often don't talk about is the easiest way to prevent the spread of disease and insects is cleaning your stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's go into the garden.
We're gonna work.
We're gonna learn the rest of this in the garden. Let's talk weeds. Well, I guess there's no really hard and fast rule, but I'll pull out every single weed this time of year that I can find and cover the soil with straw. You could use a cover crop too, which is a plant that would grow afterwards. But depending upon when they go to seed, you have to be very vigilant about cutting them down before they go to seed, or else you'll have a cover crop weed the next year. So what I like to do is I just pull out all the weeds. If I'm going to add anything to the soil, compost or stuff, I'll add it. And then I cover everything with straw. There's other kinds of mulches you can use. I like straw because it decomposes pretty quickly. Jumping worms, which are a problem in some areas here, don't like to live in straw, or they'll live in bark mulch. So by covering that up, when it's time to plant next spring, your life is going to be a lot easier when you have very few weeds that have broken through.
And that's better than using the mulch over here.
Well, you could use the mulch. The straw will generally decompose more easily, and you'll be able to kind of turn it in. And I like it because you usually get it in bags, which means it's not harboring little buggies, little pests. And make sure if you're going to do that you're getting straw, not hay. Hay has weed seeds in it. So if you put that down, you might be planting a bed of weeds. Straw generally has no seeds in it.
One of these has a very deep root.
Yes, the weeds have the best roots.
So when it comes to soil health, one of the things you should realize is different plants pull different nutrition from the soil. So if you keep planting the same thing in the same place all the time, eventually you're not going to get a very good plant and crop from that spot because you will have depleted the nutrition. So there are things you can do to put nutrition back, but it's never instant. So one of the best things to do is if you planted your tomatoes here this year, next year you plant them here. The year after that, plant them over there. If you can do a 3-year rotation, that's good. If you can do a 4-year rotation, that's better. You want to make sure to rotate where you plant things to maintain the healthy of the soil in terms of diseases and insects that are bad for your plants. Think about writing down, you did journaling here, right? Writing down where you planted things. So next year when you plant, you know to plant them in different places. If you plant a whole row of tomato plants, what you're telling those bugs that love tomato plants, like hornworms, is restaurant is over here. Whereas if you plant one and you plant some different things next to it and move them around, it's less likely to be attacked. And if it is attacked, it's not going to get all your tomato plants. It's only going to get the ones in that area. No matter how large your garden, you can avoid planting like 3 tomatoes right next to each other, right? You can move them around. All right, so pests do overwinter in the garden. Certain insects will lay eggs that will overwinter in the garden. Sometimes if you're digging around your garden, you might pick up like a cocoon of something. That's a grub. Though this time of year, you're probably not going to see them. They're probably down already. But because they have a life cycle where they come up. Anytime you want to get one of those pests, you have to get them when they're up on top. But all kinds of fungus persist in the garden over the winter. The ones that you're going to encounter here are here because they're survivors. They live in our climate. They like the mountains. So if it's on your plant, there's a good chance there's some vestige of it in your soil. So we're going to move things around, all right? And that's another reason, like when Dan was saying, you don't want to move it with your clippers from one area to the other, all right? So pests, the soil health is number 1. Number 2, This is a good time of year to just like, we're a little late here, but you know, towards the end of this, and lots of times, even in the middle of the summer, you look under the leaves. You'll find sometimes there's little egg masses there, or there's some little bugs there. It helps to try and look up and learn the difference between the good bugs and the bad bugs.
I killed a good bug.
What'd you
So
kill?
Sad. It was a tomato hornworm that had the white.
That parasite wasp.
Parasite wasp, yep.
Well, okay, right. Does everybody know what this is about?
No.
Okay, so the tomato hornworm, which is kind of an interesting looking
It is. Yeah.
fat animal.
And it's like, feels like jelly.
Yeah.
Like,
So it's this green thing, very hard to see on the tomato plant because it's the same color as the stem.
exactly the same.
So they will defoliate, they will eat your tomato plant, they will eat your ground cherry plants, they will eat your cherry tomato plants. They can do it in like 2 days. But by the time you see it, if it's got these little white bumps all over it, you don't want to kill it because those bumps are parasitic wasps. And they get into the hornworm and they consume it from the inside. They're going to kill the hornworm. And those wasps are beneficial to have around. You want them around next year when the other hornworms show up. But what I do, I don't leave the hornworm on the tomato plants. I take them off the tomato plant. I put them on a wood fence somewhere else where they're going to still survive the wasps, but he's not going to be able to eat the plant. And they don't bite or anything.
No.
So you can just, they're not kind of appetizing to look at, but you know.
And fun fact about the tomato hornworm is they are bioluminescent
Oh, yeah.
under a black light. So what I do is when I think I have them,
You go out at night.
I go out at night with my black light flashlight and I look for them. And the parasitic wasps, because they're white, will also glow under a black light, so they're easier to find. So if they don't have the eggs, then they get relocated.
Right. Do you know what a squash borer is? You have squash, and it's this little larva that was really deposited the year before. It eats into the stem, and it starts consuming the plant from the inside. That's called a squash borer. You know, if you're up to it, you can do surgery on the plant if you only have one and get rid of it. But, you know, that will overwinter in the soil. And even if you skip a year and put a squash there the year after that, it'll get your plant again.
Things like squash borer, learning the life cycle through your local extension of Master Gardeners. So with squash borers, you can miss that whole life cycle by just planting your squash a little bit later.
In July.
Yeah, so what I do is when I'm buying my zucchini seeds, I look for a quick crop, like 55, 60 day. And I actually will pull up my garlic and immediately put in my squash. And I just pulled my last zucchini out of the garden on Sunday.
Yeah. We actually pulled the pumpkin, which is the same, you know, susceptible to the same thing. It's a squash.
But because we planted later, we missed that whole life cycle of the squash vine borer.
Parsley you can grow in the same spot. What you'll find on parsley sometimes are the caterpillars of the swallowtail butterflies, which are good. The caterpillars aren't great, but the butterflies are good. So you put up with the caterpillars. Parsley, I've had it snow. The snow melts and parsley's smiling up at me from the garden. So it's pretty hardy. And you can see it. I know they had a frost here, so it looks beautiful, right?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Now, tomatoes, out. We used to say cut down everything, but now we know better. We know that they're important, beneficial insects that need us to leave dead plants for them to survive. Bees, our native bees are ground bees, solitary bees. They're not hive bees like the European honeybees. And in the winter, they live in the hollow stems. So you always want to leave something for them. Right? I mean, if you live where you're surrounded by woods close, then, you know, you can take down more in your garden. But if you're in a flat area like this, you want to leave something.
I would leave
my
flowers.
You can leave flowers, yeah. So.
And there's a handout in your folder that talks about
We are leaving
Yeah.
some up.
And like the echinacea, we'll probably leave
Echinacea is a perfect thing.
And the birds will eat the
Perennials
seeds.
are really better to leave up than the annuals. But stuff like this, we had tomato blight here.
Yep.
This should come out. Fungus is particularly troublesome when it hits things like tomatoes. It generally moves up the stem. So if you see things happening with lower leaves, you know, what you want to do is, number one, always water when the leaves have chance to dry off. Okay? So you're going to watch the weather and you're going to watch the time of day. Because in order for fungus to thrive, it needs certain optimal conditions, right? It likes humidity, it likes heat, right? And it likes a particular host plant. Different fungus will like different plants. So, you know, you want to be vigilant about that. The other thing is, you know, again, if you don't have a huge garden, it's a bit challenging, but you want to keep lots of air between your plants. Circulating air is one of the best ways to keep plants healthy. All right.
We got aphids.
We have, let's show everybody an aphid. Come on. Show and tell. Aphids.
Here, let me,
Courtney, can you? You know, aphids come in a lot of colors. They can be anything from white to green to red to black.
Yeah.
Where are you going to put this plant when you take it out?
Garbage.
Garbage.
Any plant that's diseased or has bugs, you want to bag it. It's really important to mark where you had your tomatoes and mark where you had your squash and cucumbers, because the pests that really create problems, fungus that creates problems, do overwinter very well in our soil. So you really want to move that around. Is this our new garlic bed?
That's our new garlic bed.
So anytime before the ground is frozen, you're going to plant garlic.
So this is,
Music.
we'll just talk about seed garlic for a minute. So the reason they call it seed garlic is because you want, the bigger the clove, the bigger the head of garlic you're going to end up with. So what you buy in the grocery store, you can grow garlic with, more than likely something might come up, but it's going to be smaller. So this is very much bigger than what you get in the store.
But also a lot of grocery store garlic is sprayed,
Yeah.
and when they spray it, it does inhibit it.
So they're not very compacted.
What about this, guys?
Just make a circle with your trowel.
Yeah.
For this kind of bulb, it's almost the exact right size. So the trowel, see? Stick it in, it's done. So we plant them in the fall. In the spring, you'll see green leaves that look grass-like almost. They'll come up. After a few weeks, you'll see a scape come up. A scape is like a flower stem. And in fact, if you didn't cut it off, you would get a flower at the end of it. So once the scape starts to curl, you cut it off as close to the base as possible, because we don't want the energy going into a flower. We want the energy staying at the bulb level. So once the leaves start to die back, you can harvest your bulbs. Usually you want to dry them for about a week, clean them off, cut off the excess leaves, dead leaves, roots, whatever, and then store them in a cool, dry place with good circulation. One more.
One more.
You want to do that one?
How deep do you plant them?
I planted these around 3 inches deep. I've seen people that put them a lot closer to the surface, but we have so many critters, not that they're going to eat your garlic bulbs, but they like to search for other stuff. They like to move things around. So I like to put them, you know, a good, you know, about twice the height of the bulb deep. And that's it. So you can see they're all planted. We're going to water and cover with straw. Okay.
How much do you want on it?
Just a nice cover, so you can't see the soil, but it doesn't have to be super deep. In beds, I use just for greens. I use a pretty light layer. If I'm putting a new perennial in for its first winter, I'll give it a really nice comforter. A few inches. We're doing good.
It'll look so good, too.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
It's going to be wonderful when you see things coming back.
Oh, it looks so good, guys.
Okay, I'm turning in my trowel.
No, say it's not so.
Well, I hope we see you next year.
Oh, yes, definitely. Right.